What if Game Freak had introduced Roselia in Generation 1? To see how this would play out, I have backported it into yellow version, and now I'm going to do a solo playthrough with it following my standard rules, which are in the description. It debuted in the Pokemon series in Generation 3 when the special stat was both special attack and special defense, so I had to make a creative choice as to whether I would give it special attack or special defense, as it's special here in Generation 1. I felt like Game Freak would have gone with the higher value here because grass types all deal special damage. So in this video, Roselia's base stats are 50 HP, 60 attack, 45 defense, 65 speed, and 100 special. Because Generation 1 is all kinds of janky, its speed stat influences its critical hit rate, so Roselia is going to get crits 12.5% of the time. The other creative choices that I had to make were, for example, making the front sprite, which I based off of the Generation 3 Roselia sprite, and then the back sprite, which I based off the Generation 3 sprite, but I downscaled it doing my own pixel art. We're going to see it in just a second when I go into the battle against the rival, but first I nicknamed my Roselia Rosie after one of my cats. Why? I don't know. The names are similar, and my cat's cute. Roselia is also cute, so let's get into the battle. Hopefully you like the back sprite. It's trying to be kind of accurate, but also kind of janky in the spirit of Generation 1. Alright, so let's talk about Roselia's moves. To start, I have given it Absorb and Growth, which is based explicitly on its Generation 3 set, where it also starts with these two moves. There, it learns Poison Sting at level 9, Stun Spore at 13, Mega Drain at 17, Leech Seed at 21, Magical Leaf at 25, Grass Whistle at 29, which inflicts sleep, Giga Drain at 33, Sweet Scent at 37, Ingrain at 41, Toxic at 45, Petal Dance at 49, Aromatherapy at 53, and Synthesis at 57. I'm sort of second guessing my choice to read that entire set. It's pretty long, so I'm gonna have to remove some of those moves because I won't have enough options available to me in Generation 1. Any moves that were introduced in Generation 3, like Grass Whistle for example, I will try to replace with an equivalent from Generation 1, so in this case I'm going to give it Sleep Powder instead. The moves that were introduced in Generation 1 I'm just going to give directly to Roselia, and then some I'm just going to delete entirely, like Aromatherapy and Synthesis, since there aren't really good choices to replace those moves with. I could have gone for Recover at 57, or modified and added Synthesis to the game since the effect is already in the game, and there are no weather effects to buff the move anyway, but I decided against that. Through TM and HM things get a little bit more complicated. I generally look at the Generation 3 tutor list for this because a lot of the moves that were learned by TM in Generation 1 were then turned into Generation 3 tutors. For example, some moves specific to Roselia, which I'm going to put on its TM and HM learn set, are Body Slam, Double Edge, Mimic, Substitute, and Swords Dance. There was the option to potentially give it Swift because it does learn this move in Emerald, but it doesn't get it in Fire Red and Leaf Green, so I decided against it for this backport. After all, Fire Red and Leaf Green are the definitive Generation 3 Kanto games, so if Roselia doesn't get it there, it probably shouldn't get it here in Generation 1. Of course, it should learn both of the grass-type TMs, so Mega Drain and Solar Beam, and beyond that, it's going to get all of the generic moves like Toxic, Bide, and Rest. Okay, so that's our Roselia for the playthrough. Now, let's get into the specifics of this run. You've seen the title, and it is not clickbait. I think that Roselia has the chance to be one of the top performing Pokemon in Yellow version. Here's my tier list with all the Pokemon I have ranked in Yellow version, including the backports that I have done to date, so Pokemon like Crobat and Kingdra are also included here. I definitely think that out of all the backports I have done, Roselia is going to be the best performer so far. By the way, Editor Scott here, when I said that, I was forgetting that I did a run with Celebi, and it absolutely crushed Yellow, so I was not assuming that Roselia would be faster than Celebi's 40-minute time. Okay, let's get back to talking about why Roselia is going to be good in Yellow version, and it's actually a similarity between it and the legendary grass type. One of the reasons is it has a medium slow growth rate, which is by far the best growth rate for solo challenges. You level up quickly in the early game, gaining a lot of momentum, and by the time the growth rate becomes a hindrance around level 68, you've usually beaten the champion. And I think Roselia is going to be able to get through the game before that, because it has access to Swords Dance and Growth, two of the most powerful setup moves in Generation 1. Growth boosts my special, which increases both my attack and my defensive stats, and Swords Dance boosts my attack stat by 2 stages, plus it can be paired with Body Slam. Essentially, Roselia is a slightly worse version of Victory Bell, and Victory Bell is the top performer in my Pokemon Yellow tier list, with an incredible 36-minute time. Not even the legendary birds were able to eclipse it. The early game is a little bit annoying because I don't have super effective damage against the bugs in Viridian Forest. I'm just gonna skip all of the trainers and fight the mandatory trainer first. I'm using Growth here to boost the damage of Absorb, and then I'm chipping away at the Caterpie with +3. The fact that I recover a little bit of health per hit allows me to take the victory, level up to 8, skipping 7 entirely, and then I head into Brock's gym. Before fighting him, I'm going to take on the Lightyear's junior trainer. I figured he'd be fast experience. His Diglett brings Roselia up to level 9, and then his Sandshrew brings me to level 10. Before Brock, I save, which is probably just wasted time. I am going to crush the Rock-type specialist. His first Pokemon is Geodude. Absorb one-shots it. Roselia levels up to level 11. This is the power of the medium slow growth rate. His last Pokemon is Onix. I one-shot it as well with Absorb, leveling up to 12. And now I'm ready to head out onto Route 3. I don't even heal before I do this because Roselia has the answers it needs. Now since I've passed level 9, I have access to Poison Sting, which is super effective against bug types in Generation 1. This gives me consistent damage against the Caterpie line and okay neutral damage against the Weedle line. The fact that I'm part Poison type means that I can't be poisoned, so the first battle is easy here. The next battle against Youngster Ben is a little bit different. The Rattata brings Roselia so close to fainting. I go down to 4 hit points before I finally knock it out. I was lucky that I was setting up with Growth and that Absorb heals damage. Also for the Ekans, this move comes through for me and just barely allows me to squeeze out a win. I fight the Bug Catcher next. He has more Pokemon and they're pretty easy to take out with Poison Sting instead of the Lass who has a Nidoran. I think she would be worse and give just less experience. I clear the final Bug Catcher and then head into Mount Moon. Unlike in Fire Red and Leaf Green where there's a TM for Bullet Seed here in Generation 1, I'm not going to get a move through a TM. However, I am going to learn a new move in the form of Mega Drain once I reach level 17. This is a big upgrade when compared with Growth, but I still don't have particularly good moves against any of the poison types like these ones on the Super Nerds team. Anyways, he's still not a problem. All of these early game poison types are generally quite bad if you have the poison type yourself. If you look at the 3 starters from Generation 1, Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle, Bulbasaur is the only one that is a dual type, and I believe that Game Freak gave it the poison type just so that it wasn't so bad against poison types in the early game. Preventing the player from getting poison status conditions on their starter is just a nice little handicap that really gives new gamers a chance to get through the early game without having too many headaches. After grabbing the Dome Fossil and defeating Jesse and James, I head into Cerulean City, and of course I'm gonna face Misty first. Before her though, I do some extra training battling the Swimmer and then the mandatory junior trainer, and now I am ready for my second gym battle. Misty leads with Staryu. I go for Growth here, setting up because the Starfish can only use Tackle and it's doing very little damage. I know that once I use Mega Drain, I am going to heal to full before the Starmie comes out, which is exactly what happens. Her Ace is not able to do much to me, plus she'll also use X-Defense and Hardens sometimes. I finish her off and earn my second badge in dominant fashion. I decided to fight her before the rival because I wanted as much experience as possible before going up against the Spearow, which knows Peck. My first Mega Drain does uninspiring damage, so I decided to set up Growth twice. The Spearow goes for Leer twice while I do this, and then its follow-up Peck does massive damage, but Roselia survives in orange health, and because my special is raised, my next Mega Drain finishes it off. Of course, the following Sandshrew and Rattata are no threats with Mega Drain, but the Eevee has a decent special stat, so it does survive, but it has no way to knock me out. Okay, so let's talk about Nugget Bridge now, because a lot of the trainers here resist grass-type moves. I noticed this when playing Venusaur a long time ago on the channel. It's just so much slower here when compared to the other 2 starters. Roselia suffers from similar problems. It doesn't have a hard-hitting grass-type move that can bypass the not very effective damage. This is one spot where Victory Bell is just so much better than all the other grass types because Razor Leaf always gets critical hits, allowing it to do a lot of damage even when grass-type moves are resisted. So things are slow going until I get to Bill's house and rescue him from his crazy science experiments. After that, I backtrack to Cerulean City, defeat the Rocket, and then head to Vermilion City. Before I get there, I have to face Sandy, the person who has 3 Pidgeys. Of course, I can't one-shot her Pokemon. I set up twice with Growth to ensure that my follow-up hits will one-hit the Pidgeys, and I don't have problems in the end. Luckily, no shenanigans from Sand Attack. On the SSN, things are going to fundamentally change for me because I can get Body Slam to hit Pokemon that resist Grass-type moves. Roselia's attack stat isn't great, but Body Slam is such a fantastic move, it sort of makes up for this on top of the fact that I also have the badge boost from Brock's badge. Every time I use Growth, I actually compound this on top of itself, so that's another way in which physical moves can still be useful. I get to show off this new move against the rivals team on the SS and Body Slam 1 hits the Spearow, so he has no chance against me. And with his team completely finished off, I think it is time to roll the silly music and face Surge. He has a lone Raichu, I resist electric type attacks, and Mega Kick misses. Mega Punch only does about a third. I can use Mega Drain to gain back health. It's actually getting kinda sketchy here. If the Raichu crit, I might have problems. He brings me down to 4 hit points, but then he throws the fight by using an X speed and I knock out his only Pokemon. Okay, let's go through the trainers between Cerulean City and Lavender Town in rapid succession. The Wrapping Lass could be a problem because Body Slam just barely isn't one-hitting the Oddishes, meaning they could set up with Stun Spore and then I could get wrapped to death from the Bellsprout, but this doesn't play out today and I make it by her. Just inside the cave, the 2 Pokemaniac aren't a problem. I am technically weak to Confusion, but of course I have super effective damage with Mega Drain. The Status Condition Junior Trainer is frustrating because she puts Roselia to sleep, but after that, the self-destructing Hiker stands no chance. With him cleared, there is 1 mandatory Gambler before Celadon City, and he has fire types, but they're not really that scary because Roselia has a high special stat. Alright, so let's head into the mid-game. The first thing I do here is explore the hideout to grab an extra rare candy. I think that in a second playthrough, Roselia might be able to skip this to save about 20 seconds of time, but I didn't want to take that risk in my first run. Also, I do want to note that this first playthrough was played alongside a bunch of my supporters over on Discord. If you want to play and chat alongside me while doing one of these challenges, we host these once a month for all my supporters that are YouTube members or Patreon supporters. Thank you so much if you choose to support this channel. In the department store, I don't have very much money because I've been cutting most optional trainers and I've also not been picking up items. I figured that would just be a waste of time with Roselia. As a result, I can only buy a single calcium, but every little bit does help. The rival in Pokemon Tower is next. I have Sleep Powder at this point, so I can put the Fearow to sleep, set up with Growth, and then sweep through his team. Growth is kind of slow to set up with because it takes 6 full turns to set up. However, it triggers the badge boost 6 times, which is twice as many times as Swords Dance, so if I need speed, this is definitely the move that's better. But Swords Dance is probably going to be faster in the mid-game, so I want to get it as soon as possible. One requirement for unlocking it is defeating the rival here in Pokemon Tower, and then defeating Jesse and James. Before them, I have to fight the Chandler in the tower, which are sometimes problematic, specifically this lady who has 2 Ghastly. They love to paralyze you with Lick, confuse you, and then hit with Nightshade for consistent damage. Luckily, I have Sleep Powder, so they aren't an issue even though my moves are resisted. I defeat Jesse and James, who aren't problematic. Once again, Sleep Powder is great, and with them out of the way, I gain access to the Poké-Flute. This usually means I spend some time on Cycling Road defeating trainers for good experience yields. With a Grass type, that doesn't make a lot of sense though because the Poison types here will take time to knock out. Instead, I just skip all the trainers, head to the Safari Zone, collect some vitamins, dig back to Celadon City, and then travel east to Saffron City. Sylph is the location where I can get the TM for Swords Dance. However, I do think that Roselia is going to need a few additional levels before I fight the rival. I don't want to backtrack here later and lose time. I grind on 2 additional trainers, this guy with 2 Cubones and this guy with a Machop and a Machoke. This brings Roselia up to level 35, where I use rare candies to boost it all the way up to level 42. I'm not doing this to learn new moves, I just figured Roselia isn't going to need the levels in the late game after it gets Swords Dance. I might as well just use the candies now and make the rival as easy as possible. Before him, I almost forget to pick up the TM for Swords Dance. This happens more than I would like to admit in my playthroughs. Luckily, I was doing this in a group, so someone else mentioned Swords Dance and then I was able to walk back and pick it up. I teach this powerful setup move in the place of Growth because I don't think that setting up my special is the right late game play. I'm approaching this run in the same way I did with Victory Bell. By the way, Victory Bell doesn't actually get Growth. That is one of the main differences between it, Bellsprout, and Weepinbell. The 2 prior evolutions both get the powerful setup move, but the final evolution doesn't. Turns out though, it doesn't need it to be a monster. Okay, time for the rival in Sylph. This one is straightforward. I can use Sleep Powder on the Sandslash, and then set up 3 times with Swords Dance, maxing out my attack stat. This isn't badge boosting my special, so when Mega Drain hits, it does not one-shot his lead in a single turn. But because of his AI, which is modification number 3, he is always going to choose Poison Sting with the Sandslash. I forgot about that, and I probably shouldn't have used Sleep Powder because I just would have gained back the health that Poison Sting would have done from the beginning of the battle. I continue using my special move against the Cloyster, taking a little bit of damage from Aurora Beam, but not enough to be concerned with. Following that, I one-shot the Magneton, but the Kadabra is faster. It goes for Psybeam, gets a massive hit, but Roselia survives on orange health and knocks it out. All that remains is Flareon and Body Slam one-shots. Okay, Jesse and James, I crushed them. Also Giovanni, he is terrible in this game, and after that, I backtracked to Celadon City to face Erica. The rival in Sylph was the first time I used my Sleep Powder Swords Dance strategy. I could have also gone for it here, but I figured just skipping Sleep Powder and the chance to miss was smarter. I set up fully with Swords Dance and then one-hit all 3 of her Pokemon. This fight is so simple. But things are going to get a little bit more complicated from here. In Fuchsia City, I have to fight some jugglers in Koga's gym, and they all have Psychic types. I wanted to ensure that I was one-hitting all their Pokemon so they couldn't stack up damage with multiple confusions. I set up with one Swords Dance and then sweep the first juggler with Body Slam. The second one, I take the same approach, but I figured the Hypno would survive a single hit because it's pretty bulky, and it does. That said, it just tries Poison Gas, which has no effect on Roselia, so I just defeat him for free. Alright, it is time for the bug specialist, Koga. Let's see how this goes. His AI is a little bit weird here. You would think that he would always be prioritizing Psychic because it's super effective against my Poison type, but he also sees that Toxic is super effective against my Grass type. So there's the potential for the Venonat to just sit there and do nothing. He can also use X attacks on it. I didn't want to chance getting hit by Psychic multiple times, so I put it to sleep and then set up with Swords Dance. After that, Body Slam is consistently one-hitting all of the Venonats and I make it to the Venomoth. This is a really good position, but Roselia is slower, so his Psychic type is able to deal massive super effective damage before I strike. This takes me under half health. Body Slam then crits, which bypasses my beneficial stat changes from Swords Dance, doing less damage. Still, it does about half. I will need to survive the next Psychic in order to attack again. Venomoth doesn't choose Toxic, instead attacking, and in this case it gets a critical hit and Roselia takes its first reset. This is disappointing, but it came on the 5th gym leader, so overall I'm still doing really well. In my next battle against Koga, I get annoying crits against the first 2 Venonats, failing to knock them out in a single hit with Body Slam, so I take extra damage from Psychic before I make it to his 3rd Venonat. Luckily here, I do not crit, and I arrive at the Venomoth in a not very good position. Psychic takes me down to low orange health, then Body Slam hits. This time it doesn't crit, but the question is, does Roselia have enough damage? And the answer is, it's yes actually. I knock out the Venomoth and defeat Koga. I realize for these fights I sometimes have certain turns of phrases that you're probably getting used to anticipating, so I'm trying to change things up a little bit and keep things fresh for all of you. After grabbing strength and the rare candy in the Warden's house, I head south on the sea to Cinnabar Island. Normally here I'll fight Psyche, the Goldeen and Seeking trainer, but today I'm just gonna skip him because Roselia is on a path to victory. This thing doesn't want to wait for anything. That said, once arriving in Blaine's gym, I realize that I'm about to level up, so I'll lose my speed badge boosts after the Ninetales, and that didn't feel like a successful strategy. As a result, I save and then take on the one guy who has a single Rapidash in the gym. It's pretty slow because it's just a random trainer's Pokemon. I can put it to sleep, set up with Swords Dance, and knock it out with Body Slam, leveling up to 47. I top up Roselia's levels with 3 rare candies to 50, and then I take on Blaine. It's here that I have a small public service announcement for any red and blue fans. Blaine is really good in yellow version, which is going to be a shock to all of you. I use Sleep Powder on the Ninetales, set up with Swords Dance, triggering the badge boost, increasing my speed stat, so that now I'm going to move first against all of his fire types. Body Slam one-shots his lead, Rapidash is next. I decide not to put it to sleep, instead just being offensive right away, and I take it down. Well, actually I Body Slam it down, preventing it from using Takedown. Arcanine on the other hand could choose this move because Blaine does not have good AI, so there's the potential for him to choose Reflect or Takedown, or he could choose Flamethrower or Fire Blast. In this case, after Roselia crits, failing to get the knockout, he does choose the normal type move, which I thought would be good, but Arcanine gets a critical hit and Roselia faints. Okay, so that was an 18% chance to lose there. I'll try this again. My Sleep Powder does not go as well against the Ninetales this time. I lose some health. I try using Mega Drain to gain back some of this in preparation for the Arcanine, but then it wakes up, chooses Flamethrower, and Roselia faints again. Holding on to growth might have been a good idea just for this battle so that I could improve my defenses against special moves. In the third battle, I make it back to the Arcanine. This time, it does not get a critical hit with takedown, it just does pathetic damage, and with that I defeat Blaine. Okay, there's only one more gym leader left before Giovanni. She's in Saffron City, so I pick up the TM for Mimic first. This will be useful later on during the Elite Four. For now though, I have a Psychic type specialist to deal with. Sleep Powder, Swords Dance twice, and then I figured that Body Slam was just going to one-hit all of her Pokemon. It does against the Abra and the Kadabra. Those are both with critical hits too, so even if my damage is reduced, I'm still doing a lot. I set up only twice because I needed enough speed to move first against the Alakazam. However, Roselia levels up before it comes in, and I lose my speed badge boost. As a result, her ace moves first, choosing Psychic, getting a critical hit, giving me my 4th reset. Okay, I'm going to prevent the mid-battle level up by defeating some trainers in her gym. I felt like this guy with Slowbro would be enough, but when I defeat it, I just barely don't go over the level's threshold. So I have to fight one more trainer in the gym. I chose this guy with Slowpoke because I have super effective damage, and with him out of the way, I go back into the battle against Sabrina. Now, without the level up before the Alakazam, I move first, hit with Body Slam, I don't get a critical hit, and her ace falls. There's only one more gym left. It's Giovanni with his ground types, and they're actually quite good in yellow version. I could have done extra training in the gym to go over a damage rounding threshold and also to prevent the mid-battle level up, but I figured this wasn't necessary. Giovanni's two fast Pokemon come right at the beginning of the battle. The Dugtrio has 133 speed and the Persian has 135 speed. While the Dugtrio is going to be able to hit me with moves like Dig, Earthquake, or Fissure, I think that once I set up with Swords Dance and outspeed it, I should just sweep his entire team. Okay, will the Dugtrio get me? That's the question. I go for Sleep Powder, it uses Earthquake, doing about half before I put it to sleep. Then I start setting up with Swords Dance to improve my speed stat and my special in this case because I now have Blaine's badge. This allows me to use Mega Drain, one-shotting his lead, healing back into the green. I didn't want to one-shot Persian, instead I just go for Mega Drain twice, trying to knock it out and heal back to full, but I just barely fail to knock it out with my second attack. At least on the third turn it just goes for Screech and I finish it off. Nidoqueen's next. I use Body Slam, getting a one hit, so the Nidoking is also going to fall to a single attack. Because even though I level up before it, the badge boosts are reset, but not my stage modifier, so I retain my +6 in attack. As a result, I make it to the Rhydon, and of course, Mega Drain is enough for this thing. Okay, the rival before the league. This one's really straightforward. His Sandslash is kind of bad in this battle. It does no Poison Sting, so once again, I should not be using Sleep Powder. I set up with Swords Dance. After that, Mega Drain one-shots. Body Slam takes care of the Execute. Mega Drain manages the Cloyster, and Body Slam is good against his three final Pokemon, the Magneton, the Kadabra, and the Flareon. Okay, there are two questions now in Victory Road. Do I spend extra time grabbing the rare candy at the beginning of this location? And my answer was yes. I want it just so I can manipulate my experience during the league to prevent mid-battle level ups if I have to. Losing my speed before a Pokemon like the Aerodactyl on Lance's team would cause critical resets that would really delay Roselia's finish. The second question that I have to answer is, do I want to battle extra trainers? And my answer here is no. I think Roselia is fine. Lorelei, after all, is the first Elite Four member, and she's basically a water-type specialist. To avoid Dugong's Aurora Beam, I use Sleep Powder, it misses, and I take a takedown, which is not the worst thing in the world. Now that the Dugong has some damage, it can use Rest to put itself to sleep in the case that I miss. I don't, it goes to sleep, I set up with Swords Dance, and then I start my sweep. Body Slam one-hits the Dugong, I use Mega Drain on the Cloyster, which does not one-hit. I tank an Ice Beam as a result, but luckily it doesn't freeze, and I move on to her third Pokemon, Slowbro. First turn it could use Psychic, but it doesn't, and on the second turn it's locked into Amnesia because of her AI. That means I knock it out with 2 Body Slams. The Jinx is too frail to survive a single one, but the Lapras probably will. I decided to play with Sleep Powder there instead of just attacking right away in fear of Blizzard. If it crit or froze me, even if it just regularly hit me, I think it might do enough damage. Without having to contend with the Ice-type move, Roselia easily takes a first victory over the initial Elite Four member. Then there's this guy. He's not an Elite Four member, and after him there is the second Elite Four member, Agatha. But before her, I'm gonna teach Mimic in the place of Body Slam. Now, if you remember back to Victory Bell vs. Vileplume, you're probably going to be thinking that this is a mistake, and after I did it, I also slightly regretted the choice. I can use Mimic to steal moves from Agatha's team, so Wing Attack from the Golbat if she switches, or Lick from the Gengar, because both of these moves can be used against the ghosts. The mistake of teaching Mimic in the place of Body Slam is that overall it's just going to be the better move to use in the late game with Swords Dance. When I came back to play Victory Bell and I got my eventual 36-minute time with it, I was using Body Slam for this fight, Lance, and the champion, giving up Razor Leaf here in favor of having Mimic. Honestly, things were going pretty well in this battle. I had to Mimic Wing Attack to attack the ghosts, but I can just use Sleep Powder on them so that they can't attack anyway. The issues started to accumulate later into the battle after Haunter goes down. Sleep Powder misses the Arbok and it uses Glare, paralyzing Roselia and cutting my speed stat. I move on to the final Gengar, and while it can't put me to sleep with Hypnosis, it does know Psychic, which does massive damage, getting a critical hit, and Roselia has a reset. This was a painful one because the battle took so long. I saved after teaching Mimic so I don't have a chance to go back and rectify that mistake. Instead, I just have to make it through Agatha with my current set. She doesn't swap the Golbat in this time, so I get to use Lick against the ghosts, which I think is slightly better. It is super effective, giving it an effective power of 40 compared with 35 from the flying type move. I make it to the final Gengar. There's some tense action here where we miss a bunch of moves, but eventually I put it to sleep and take care of it using Lick. Okay, Lance. In Generation 2, the flying type specialist, but in this generation, he's kind of just a bunch of everything. He's got a water type here, which is also a flying type. I put it to sleep and then set up Swords Dance. Also, the Gyarados does know Hyper Beam, which I choose to take with Mimic because it's physical. In Generation 1, the type of the move determines which damage category it has, so no, Hyper Beam is not special like it is starting in Generation 4. I can use it to sweep through his team, knocking out both the Dragonairs, moving on to the Aerodactyl, where then the powerful normal type move misses, giving his flying Pokemon a chance to hit with Wing Attack. It does about a third. My next Hyper Beam fails to get the knockout, just barely. Lance uses a Hyper Potion. This is on my recharge turn, but then Aerodactyl goes for Fly and it finishes Roselia. Okay, honestly, not a great performance there. I think I might have a damage roll against the Aerodactyl though, so I just come into the battle and chance Hyper Beam on it again. This time it works out for me, I get more damage and the prehistoric Pokemon faints. That leaves only Dragonite, and Hyper Beam has more than enough damage to knock it out. Roselia levels up to 59, ensuring that I'm not going to level up in the middle of the battle against the champion, and now I am ready for the final battle in the first playthrough. In this fight, Roselia gets to demonstrate the monster that it really is in Generation 1. Because of AI, the Sandslash is locked into Poison Sting. Yes, it cannot use Earthquake, which is hilarious. It can't poison me, so I don't need a recovery move like Rest, and I don't even need to chance Sleep Powder on it. I can just set up with Swords Dance, and then use Mimic to take Earthquake, one of the best physical moves in the entire game. It, of course, crushes the Alakazam that's next, but then Executor slows things down a little bit. I have to attack this thing with resisted damage, and I do need to put it to sleep so that it doesn't choose Hypnosis against me. In this battle, if the AI sees you don't have a status condition, it is going to choose Hypnosis because it sees that Psychic moves are super effective against poison types. But when the Executor is asleep, it can't do anything, and it's just going to take a lot of damage from Earthquake, and I knock it out in only 3 hits. Magneton falls to a single Earthquake. Cloyster does survive Mega Drain, giving it a chance to use Ice Beam, but it just chooses Aurora Beam, the weaker move, and I knock it out in 2 turns. Flareon is all that's left, but Earthquake is the answer, and with that, Roselia clocks in with its first playthrough time of 50 minutes and 34 seconds, with 6 resets at level 60, and a game time of 3 hours and 8 minutes. Bringing up the tier list, we can see that this is a C tier finish, but it's a first run, so all of these other Pokemon that are currently ranked in that tier are in their second runs, or future attempts. I think because of type effectiveness in the early game, Roselia is not going to be able to achieve the heights of a Pokemon like Victory Bell, but I do think with a little bit of optimization, it might be able to get itself into the A tier alongside a Pokemon like Vileplume. After all, this is that grass type's moveset in Generation 1. It is very similar to Roselia's. The main differences are that it has Sleep Powder and Acid from the beginning, which do help it out a little bit more. Okay, so let's talk about my second run. The early game is largely unchanged from the first run because there isn't much that I can do to speed up Roselia's time. All of the major battles are quite fast, and all of the minor random battles are quite slow. Those things said, I can improve my execution solution, and in this case I'm a little bit more warmed up playing the second run, so I'm 1 minute and 38 seconds ahead of my former pace once I defeat Surge. I've been able to maintain this lead by the time I defeat the rival in Sylph, and here you will note that I did not keep growth on my moveset for Blaine. I think in general Mega Drain just solves a few more problems, specifically the Cloisters and Giovanni's team. That said, I could see some advantage putting Swords Dance in the place of Mega Drain and relying on Body Slam for a large portion of the late game. Then I can keep growth for the upcoming Koga fight, and it would have been very helpful here because the Venomoth deals massive damage, and I take a total of 2 resets here before I defeat him. Even when I pull that off, it didn't feel particularly dominant. That said, I think I made a small mistake by not facing Erica first because her experience is just free, which would give me a higher level for the poison type specialist. With her out of the way, I faced Blaine. He was awful last time, and I was so worried that he was going to cause a lot of resets this time because I'm going in 2 levels lower because I have cut some optional training. I just don't think Roselia needs it. I need Sleep Powder to come through for me in some instances, and this is one of them, but it does come through for me, and Roselia survives an attack from the Arcanine with 2 hit points and knocks it out. I am now 2 minutes and 44 seconds ahead of my previous pace. In Sabrina's gym, I ensure that I'm not going to level up during the battle, this time fighting only the Slowbro guy. Small optimization there, I don't have to battle the 2 trainers. This gives me an easy victory over her, and then I go up against Giovanni. And this time, it is very frustrating. I have reset after reset after reset to the Doug trio, bleeding a lot of time. With 4 losses here, I have given back some of my time lead that I gained during the Sabrina split. I'm 2 minutes and 40 seconds ahead now, but not nearly as much as I wanted to be over my former pace. I was really hoping to get Roselia under the 45-minute mark, or maybe even under the 44-minute mark with a lot of luck. And speaking of luck, I do not need any of it against the rival before the league. Lorelei is a different story though, because here the Lapras, which I choose not to put to sleep, does get me with a Blizzard. So I think that Sleep Powder is required there unless you want to play risky. I actually choose to play risky in the next fight, just going for Body Slam once again. This time I survive the Blizzard with low red health and I knock her ace out. For Agatha I make the change, teaching Mimic in the place of Mega Drain, keeping Body Slam for Lance. Still, this doesn't give me a victory in my first attempt against her because I get confused by the final Gengar and it finishes me off. Another long reset, losing a lot of time. I'm now over 45 minutes on the clock and I was feeling pretty disappointed. Compounding that sense of disappointment, I had another reset to Agatha before I finally defeat her on my 3rd attempt. This has lost me 51 seconds. I'm now only 1 minute and 49 seconds ahead of my previous pace. Still, I have many more resets, so my route is much more efficient. Also, this time on Lance, I don't even try mimicking Hyper Beam. Instead, I just Body Slam the Aerodactyl. I know it's going to be a 2-hit, and I assume that I'm going to survive a wing attack. I get the lucky upside here, paralyzing, preventing him from moving, and with that, I defeat the Dragonite. Still, probably not a great solution. The champion that follows should be simple, but this time I don't use Earthquake on the Alakazam, and Body Slam does not have enough damage. By the way, I just realized this while editing, but the reason Body Slam didn't do enough damage is because it crit. So it hits with a Psybeam, taking me to red health. I miss my Sleep Powder on the Executor, and it knocks me out. This run is, quite frankly, disastrous. Everything that could go wrong is going wrong. And even when that's the case, Roselia clocks in with a very respectable time, 48 minutes and 41 seconds, with 10 resets at level 58. This is a game time of 2 hours and 57 minutes. I finished the game 1 minute and 53 seconds faster than my first attempt. This result is just barely not in the B tier. Magmar, Farfetch'd, and Poliwrath all have faster times than my current Roselia run, but it is faster than Jinx and Pinsir. That said, I just didn't want to leave things here because I really did feel like Roselia could do better. So of course, I had to come back and do a 3rd playthrough with a Pokemon that isn't even in the game. This really comes down to the fact that I just enjoy playing these games more, where I challenge myself and constantly try to improve my own results. In follow-up playthroughs, it is so much fun chasing down my former times, trying to shave off just another second here and there. Sometimes all of this works out, and other times it doesn't. So, what happened with my final Roselia playthrough? Well, I don't think there's a lot to talk about with the strategy. It's very similar to the 2 previous runs. I do want to go through the bumps along the way though, so the first reset I had was against Surge, which is just so discouraging. In Sylph, I did decide to make the choice to keep Mega Drain instead of going with Growth for Blaine. This does cause some problems on Koga, but just before that, I had a blackout to this juggler. I didn't save before him, I didn't think I needed to, but apparently I did, so this wasted a little bit of time. That said, Koga wastes even more because his team is kind of annoying when you're using Roselia and you can't outspeed the Venomoth. So I was mentioning Growth before, and one possibility to get around his team is setting up my special defense so that Psychic deals less damage. I felt that running this strategy was overall not the best choice just because you can win with the Sleep Powder strategy, and not having Mega Drain is going to make later trainers like Lorelei more difficult. Now, you might think that the Growth strategy would be safer against Koga, but no, he can still win with Confusion or with a critical hit from his Venomoth. In Blaine's gym, I fight the one guy with Rapidash to level up, so I don't level up during this fight. Blaine doesn't really go according to plan. The Ninetales burns me, giving a quick reset, but after that I beat him on my second attempt. Luckily, Saffron and Giovanni don't cause any resets. After that, I crush my way to the Elite Four. I fight one wild Pokemon in Victory Road to go up to level 52, and then I use 4 rare candies to go to level 56 before starting the league. These battles are straightforward, but I do need to get some luck against Lorelei, specifically the Lapras. In this case, I chanced it after it wakes up from sleep, but I do manage to just barely pull through. For Agatha, I'm relying on the Mimic strategy, stealing Lick, and then defeating her ghosts with this move. For Lance, I make a critical misplay. I did go for Mimic on Ice Beam to one-shot the Aerodactyl. However, I failed to use this move thinking that Body Slam would do more to the Dragonite, but I was just wrong here, and I take one completely player-induced reset as a result. But after that, the champion is easy as always, and I do clock in with a better time in my third run. 46 minutes and 37 seconds with 5 resets, 1 blackout at level 61, with a game time of 2 hours and 56 minutes. These aren't the results that I was hoping for with Roselia. I really did want it to get under the 45-minute mark, but I think subconsciously I wanted to get it under 44 minutes to push it up one tier. That said, I boxed the footage on my computer for a very long time after the first 2 runs, and I came back to do this third run in the hopes of getting a better time. In the end, I just wanted to make a video and talk about this Pokemon so that all of you could see what a beast it is in these games. I think in an ideal scenario, and only with another few runs, maybe 3 to 4, Roselia could get a time under 44 minutes, and it wouldn't need that much luck to do it. This was definitely a fun run to do, so now let's rank it in the tier list. With its current time, it earns itself a placement just behind Clefable and Kingdra, and ahead of Raticate and Parasect. Also, I wanted to mention something for the keen-eyed among you. This tier list does not include Misdreavus's results because I only did a single playthrough with it, whereas every other Pokemon here has done at least 2 runs. I didn't think it was fair ranking the Ghost's first playthrough along all of these other Pokemon, so at some point in the future, maybe in October, I will have to rerun it and experience, once again, the pain of Psywave in the early game. Thank you so much for watching. If you support me on Patreon or through YouTube memberships, it means the world to me. Now, if you have made it this far, it is time for the Oak battle. This battle pushed and pulled on my emotions constantly. The Tauros is a great place to set up with Swords Dance and Sleep Powder. From there, the Executor doesn't go down to a single hit, so it can use Hypnosis, which is annoying. This thing luckily does not have any good moves, so when I wake up, I can knock it out. After that, my Swords Dance is still not enough to one-shot the Arcanine. I guess this makes sense because Roselia is very underleveled at this point. I didn't want to chance things against the Charizard because I am faster, so I put it to sleep and knock it out with 2 uses of Body Slam. I also thought that the Gyarados was going to knock me out with Hyper Beam if it hit, so I decided to once again chance Sleep Powder, and it works out, allowing me to defeat Oak on my first attempt. So that's it for Roselia in Generation 1. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you in my next one.